Imagine the very people meant to nurture and protect you are the very ones that are distorting your reality and tarnishing your reputation simply to shield their own. This is the hidden turmoil faced by children of emotionally immature parents. Okay, so today's topic is a sensitive one. We're talking about how emotionally mature parents are willing to ruin the reputation of their children in order to cause their reputation to shine. So, for the next 20 minutes, we're going to dive deep into the psyche of emotionally immature parents. And we really want to understand why they're willing to tarnish the reputations of their family members rather than working towards having healthy connections with their family members. We're also going to look at how this impacts children of emotionally immature parents and, more importantly, how they can begin healing. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Michele. I'm a somatic experiencing practitioner and the founder of the School of Transformation, which is where I meet live on Zoom every week and I do the inner work with survivors from all over the world of childhood trauma together. Here on my YouTube channel, we talk about what healing is about, what it looks like, the symptoms of unhealed trauma, but in the School of Transformation, we do the inner healing together. So if you're ready to take the next step, make sure you join me weekly on Zoom. So let's start by understanding why emotionally immature parents care more about their own reputation than resolving issues with their children. And so the first thing I want to mention is that in any family situation, there's going to be what we call rupture and repair. There are misunderstandings. There's things said that you don't really mean. I'm not saying that that's not normal, right? We all have conflict. But what I really want to highlight in this video is how emotionally immature parents, how they have more rupture, create rupture on top of rupture, and never repair. And the way they repair has to do with polishing their image and how other people see them instead of connecting and resolving the issues with their children. That's what we're going to really deep dive into. I know it's really easy to villainize parents like this, but the reality is if we just look at parents like this as all bad, then we're basically putting ourselves on the drama triangle, making them the persecutor and ourselves the victim. I really want to explain why parents do this without putting them on the drama triangle. Now, at the same time, I want to honor and validate how horrible it is to be raised in a family situation like this. So just keep in mind, I'm trying to make this as balanced as possible. Okay, so from a neurological standpoint, parents that act in this way often are operating from a place of fear and insecurity. And in a way, if you've been through trauma, we can almost relate to a sense. What I mean by that is parents that act like that are not operating from their prefrontal cortex, their thinking, their executive functioning center. They're operating from their limbic network. In other words, they're operating from a fear-based center and they're operating from their survival brain instead of their higher thinking and higher functioning areas of their brain. Now, this doesn't excuse their behavior, right? I'm not saying this so that we're like, oh, poor things. No, we're just trying to understand why they do this, right? So they're operating from that emotional center, which for whatever reason in their past, in their unhealed trauma, they have an intense fear of judgment, whether it's with society, whether it's in the family, but there's an intense fear of being judged. That's a huge trigger for them. And so when there's a disagreement, when things are not going perfectly, which by the way, things never go perfectly, right? When this happens, that triggers that wound that they have inside of them. And then to manage it, they create this like false image of perfection. And so in this broken prism of reality where they're perfect, to them, the problem must be with the other person. And so their view of themselves as perfect is their defense mechanism because of their own unresolved trauma. Now, there's that famous saying, hurt people, right? Again, we're not invalidating the pain that they cause. We're not saying it's okay. We're just looking at the why people like that tend to be like that. And so, as a result of this unhealed wound and this coping mechanism of I'm perfect, must be you, they develop narcissistic traits, borderline traits, where having an ideal self image is like oxygen. Like they cannot live, they cannot function, they cannot survive unless their idealized image is supported in the external world. And so, as a result of this, this is what compels them to control the narrative. They can't control every circumstance, they cannot control people as much as they try. Things are never 100% how they would want them to be. And so as a result, they're like, okay, well, yes, that happened and that was horrible. And maybe I did screw up there, but I'm perfect. And so I need to spin the narrative in such a way that everyone on the outside views me here and everyone else there. Now, the problem is everyone else will even include their children and their family members. Parents like this tend to be extremely tense, right? Because our emotional turmoil on the inside manifests in our body. They're usually very tense, very wound tight. But since their broken prism of reality says, I'm perfect, when they feel the uncomfortable, unresolved trauma on the inside, rather than being willing to work on it, they project it onto their children. They will create a circumstance where their child feels some kind of turmoil. And the second they see that somebody else is feeling turmoil, it's like it relieves them of what they're feeling on the inside. Because then they tell themselves, oh, that discomfort that I thought I was feeling, oh, that's not in me, that's in my son or my daughter. In essence, they're basically using their children as the garbage pail of what they don't want to feel. If they feel shame, they will provoke their child to feel shame because it's uncomfortable to feel shame. And rather than doing the inner work to heal their own shame, it's easier to deflect it or project it onto someone else. When somebody acts in this way, this behavior really stems from their own deep-seated fears of inadequacy and shame. And so by diverting their attention to their children's faults, and if they can't find any faults, creating a scenario where their children feels internally what they themselves have been feeling, they deflect scrutiny from themselves. This not only distorts the child's self-perception, but it also manipulates how other people see the child, which sadly causes isolation and an undermining of their credibility. In childhood, navigating these dynamics is extremely difficult. You wind up growing up thinking there's something severely wrong with you. And you're so confused. You don't know who you are. You have a very low self-esteem. You have no self-identity because rather than being able to develop as a person, having an authentic self, you had to live life as if you were walking through an emotional minefield. And so you were so focused on surviving that you probably struggle with having a self-identity or being able to feel safe being authentic. I know because that's what I struggled with as well. Unfortunately, when you're a child, you're forced to be in these dynamics for a long period of time. And so it rewires your nervous system. It causes you to become who you had to be to survive instead of, again, like I said, having an authentic self. The good thing is that as an adult, you can break free of these dynamics and you can reclaim your authenticity. So let's talk about how to do that. But first, I want to explain what not to do. And I'm going to say what not to do, but I want to let you know I did it. And you probably have tried as well. It's normal to do what I'm about to explain, but it doesn't work. What I mean is when I first understood these dynamics and I understood that, oh, this is why my parent is doing this, it almost gave me a little bit of hope because I was like, well, if they're doing this, maybe I can help them to see it. Maybe I can get through to them. If they can just see that this is why they're being this way, we can change it. After all, doesn't everyone want to grow and get better? The sad reality is that parents that have these deeply ingrained coping mechanisms and this unresolved trauma and this way of dealing with it by projecting instead of owning and self-reflecting, they've been in this habit for a really long time. And sometimes bringing it to their attention can often cause either a heated battle, more manipulation, which can sometimes go from overt to covert. So now they're starting to feel like you're catching on to them. So they start changing their behaviors and hiding the abuse even more, which can lead to you getting even more confused. And the bit of self that you started developing, you might lose that in an effort of trying to get through to them. It's almost like trying to get through to them is like the horse chasing the carrot on the stick. It looks like it's just out of reach. It looks like if the horse can just go a little bit faster, they'll get that carrot. But they never will, because as they're chasing it, it's running from them in a sense, right? Well, it's the same thing with people with these behaviors. They don't want to look at themselves. To look at themselves is to come face to face with the perfect image that they had to construct to survive their own trauma and realize that that was a lie. And the only people that can get to that place are people that are ready and willing to self-reflect and look at it that way. We can't make a person be ready to do their own inner work. We can't force a person, just like they can't force you to have their narrative. So rather than trying to get through to them, rather than trying to convince them or heal them, which is jumping back on the drama triangle, this time you've shifted out of victim, but now you're in rescuer mode. And you might be looking at your parent with their unhealed trauma as a victim of their own trauma, which is understandable, but we cannot heal from the drama triangle. So rather than doing that, let's talk about what works better. The first step is to really start putting down boundaries, even if the parent doesn't agree or doesn't understand them. Now, this is a lot easier said than done, because if you grew up with parents like that, I know with myself, boundaries felt like I was being a bad person. Saying no felt like I was selfish and bad, when in reality, it was simply a healthy behavior that I grew up not being allowed to have, right? So you have to understand that when you start stepping into healthy behaviors with difficult family members, it might feel uncomfortable and it might be challenging. Just know that that's a sign that you're stepping outside of your normal pattern that you grew up with. So it's a good thing. And so the motive with the boundaries is not about changing them. It's about protecting your own emotional, mental, psychological, and physical well-being. Along with setting boundaries is also growing the capacity to be with conflict. When you've had parents like this, you probably shut down with conflict. You might even struggle with feeling fear when somebody's upset or disappointed. That stems back from those unhealthy patterns in childhood. And so this is the other challenge when you're healing. Sometimes we think healing means I'm just going to feel better and better and better each time. Every day gets better. But the truth is that you need to expect things to get worse before they get better with these types of personalities. They're not happy that you're changing. You're breaking out of a role that suits their narrative. So expecting them to be happy when you're engaging in healthy behaviors that threaten their false reality is setting yourself up for disappointment. But the good news is that even if they're upset, even if they don't like the healthy behaviors, you're going to start feeling more empowered, more in your own body, and more like yourself. I remember getting the same information that I'm sharing with you right now. And it was about, rather than reacting, set a boundary down. And the first thing that went through my head was, do you know what's going to happen when I set a boundary down? Like, that person's going to get furious. They're going to scream. They're going to be out of control. And the person helping me was like, yeah. The first thing he asked me, though, was, are you safe? Are you going to be physically hurt? And I was like, no, I had no inclination that I would be touched physically. So, because again, safety is always first, right? So he was like, they're going to get worse and you're going to get better, because you're no longer being the garbage pail of what they've never learned to carry. That's going to cause that person to get even more out of control, more angry, more manipulative. But Instead of getting sucked into it, you're going to be able to stand in your own 2 feet in your own body, and you're going to feel more grounded, even though they're less grounded. And when I first heard that, I was like, how on earth is that possible? Because just somebody being angry like that made me feel ungrounded. But that's where doing our healing work comes in and helps us. As we start learning to change the beliefs that drive that instability, that inner turmoil and instability, beliefs like if they're angry, it's my fault, becomes if they're angry, that's their choice. If they're angry, that means I'm bad, becomes if they're angry, that's their choice. In other words, we start changing the beliefs that we were raised around, beliefs that are unhealthy, beliefs that keep us stuck, beliefs that keep us in unhealthy relationship patterns. And when we start doing that, everything changes. I remember seeing this person lose control emotionally, something that rarely happened since for a long time I was carrying the emotional baggage. So I had been the one that had been losing control because it was very confusing. I didn't know what was going on. So as I did my own healing and as I changed my beliefs and as I found safety in my nervous system again, changed my subconscious beliefs, broke free of those unhealthy patterns, I was able to stand there and watch it. Just like they say, the observe don't absorb. You can only apply that when you've done the inner work to change your belief system. And I was like watching this person lose emotional control simply because I had an emotional boundary up. They were accusing me of something that I didn't agree with. And so I was like, you're allowed to see that. You're allowed to say that. You're allowed to feel that, but I choose to disagree. And because I didn't soak up the shame that they were trying to project in me because probably they were feeling shame about something, I watched this person crumble right before my eyes, emotional dysregulation, and my eyes were just getting bigger. Like, how did I not see how dysregulated this person was? Well, I didn't see it because I was carrying it for that person, right? So it's a huge shift when you start breaking free of these patterns. You start becoming who you really are instead of carrying somebody else's unhealed trauma, which has caused your own trauma, right? And yeah, it's so unhealthy. And by the way, that's what I help people learn to do in the School of Transformation. So on this channel, I talk a lot about narcissistic parents, narcissistic family systems, narcissistic abuse, emotional trauma for whatever reason. But in the School of Transformation, we don't put the focus on the other person, we put the focus on ourselves. We go from looking at the symptoms to uncovering the patterns, uprooting them, changing our belief system, and rewiring our nervous system. So if you're ready, if you feel ready to put that focus on yourself, I meet live on Zoom with survivors from all over the world every week in the School of Transformation. I want to invite you to come and check us out. You can check us out as a yearly member or as a monthly member.